The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains of Sarah Chen's small apartment, casting gentle shadows across the breakfast table where 8-year-old Emma sat sketching in her notebook. 2 years had passed since David's sudden heart attack had shattered their world, yet somehow they had found their rhythm again. Sarah watched her daughter's concentrated face as she drew the same furrow between her brows that David used to get when he was deep in thought. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, refilling Emma's juice glass. "It's you and Daddy dancing," Emma replied without looking up. "For the memory box." Sarah's chest tightened with familiar grief, but also warmth. They had created the memory box together as a way to honor David, filled with drawings, photos, and written memories. It was one of many small rituals that had helped them navigate their loss. As a freelance graphic designer, Sarah had the flexibility to be present for Emma in ways that many working parents envied. Sure, some months were leaner than others, but they managed. Their modest 2-bedroom apartment might not have been the sprawling suburban home David had dreamed of, but it was filled with love, creativity, and the sound of Emma's laughter echoing off the walls. Margaret Walsh had never seen it that way. From the moment David had introduced Sarah to his mother 6 years ago, Margaret had made her disapproval crystal clear. Sarah wasn't the polished corporate wife Margaret had envisioned for her eldest son. She didn't come from the right family, didn't have a traditional career, and worst of all, in Margaret's eyes, she had failed to give David the son who would carry on the Walsh name. "She's incomplete," Margaret had once whispered to David's sister Catherine, not realizing Sarah was within earshot. What kind of woman can't give a man children? Just the one girl, and now look, she's raising that child like some bohemian artist, instead of preparing her for real success. Sarah had tried for years to win Margaret's approval. She'd attended every family gathering with homemade dishes, remembered every birthday, and bit her tongue when Margaret made cutting remarks about her little art projects or their unconventional lifestyle. David had always defended her, but Sarah knew the constant tension wore on him. Now, staring at the legal documents that had arrived 3 days ago, Sarah felt that familiar knot of inadequacy twist in her stomach. But this time, it was accompanied by pure, cold rage. Margaret Walsh was petitioning the court for partial custody of Emma. The papers painted Sarah as an unfit single mother, citing her unstable income as a freelancer, their inadequate living situation, and her inability to provide the educational and social advantages that the Walsh family can offer. Margaret had enlisted David's siblings, successful lawyer Catherine and investment banker Robert, to testify that Emma would be better served living part-time at the Walsh family compound, attending private school, and being raised with proper values and stability. Sarah's hands trembled as she read Margaret's statement. The child needs the influence of a complete family structure and the financial security that Sarah Chen simply cannot provide. Emma Walsh deserves better than this bohemian lifestyle that prioritizes artistic pursuits over practical success. Emma looked up from her drawing, noticing her mother's distress. "Mommy, are you okay?" Sarah quickly folded the papers, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, babe. Just some boring grown-up stuff." But she wasn't fine. The woman she had spent years trying to please, the woman whose approval she had desperately sought even after David's death, was now trying to steal the only family she had left. Margaret wasn't content with merely disapproving of Sarah. She wanted to erase her from Emma's life entirely, to mold her granddaughter into the perfect Walsh heir that Sarah had supposedly failed to provide. As Sarah helped Emma gather her school supplies, her mind raced. How could she fight this? Margaret had money, influence, and the support of David's siblings. She had the big house, the private school connections, and a network of powerful friends. What did Sarah have? A portfolio of graphic design work, a modest savings account, and the fierce love of a mother who would do anything to protect her child. Looking at Emma's bright smile as she headed off to school, Sarah made a silent promise. Margaret Walsh might see her as incomplete, but she was about to discover just how fierce a supposedly inadequate mother could be when her child was threatened. 3 weeks after receiving the custody papers, Sarah found herself standing in Margaret's imposing foyer, her hands clenched around a cardboard box. The mahogany walls seemed to loom over her, decorated with portraits of Walsh family patriarchs, whose stern expressions had always made her feel unwelcome. "I've gathered the last of David's things," Margaret said coldly, not bothering with pleasantries. "I assumed you'd want them before Emma comes to live where she belongs." Sarah bit back her response. Her lawyer had advised her to avoid confrontation until the hearing, but Margaret's smugness was almost unbearable. The older woman handed over the box with theatrical reluctance, as if parting with sacred relics. His college books, some old photographs, odds and ends from his childhood room. Margaret continued. Nothing of real value, of course. The important family heirlooms will stay here for Emma when she's old enough to appreciate them properly. Back in her apartment that evening, Sarah sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by the contents of the box. Emma was at her friend's house for a sleepover, giving Sarah the solitude she needed to sort through these final pieces of David's life. Each item felt like a small goodbye: his worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird from freshman English, a photo of him and his college roommates, a wooden box that had belonged to his grandfather. She was about to close the wooden box when her fingers caught on something, a slight unevenness in the bottom. Pressing gently, she discovered a hidden compartment containing a small leather journal she'd never seen before. With trembling hands, Sarah opened to the first page. David Walsh, Private Thoughts, written in his familiar handwriting. The entries were dated from their last year together, and as Sarah read, her world shifted on its axis. March 15th, Mom made another comment about Sarah's artistic phase today. I'm tired of defending my wife to someone who refuses to see her brilliance. Sarah has more creativity and genuine warmth in her little finger than my entire family combined. I need to find a way to protect her and Emma from Mom's toxicity. April 2nd, discovered something that makes me sick. Mom has been intercepting mail addressed to Sarah, found a stack of letters from her father in Mom's desk drawer when I was looking for stamps. Sarah's dad has been trying to reach her for months, wanting to reconcile before his cancer gets worse. Mom destroyed every single letter. How could she be so cruel? Sarah thinks her father doesn't care, but he's been trying to contact her all along. May 20th, started a separate savings account Mom doesn't know about. If something happens to me, I want Sarah and Emma to have complete independence from my family's influence. The account is hidden in the safety deposit box at First National. Sarah, if you're reading this someday, the key is taped under Emma's jewelry box. Box 8, June 8th, made a decision. After Emma's birthday party, I'm going to have a serious conversation with Mom about boundaries. No more criticism of Sarah, no more undermining her parenting, no more treating my wife like she's not good enough for this family. If Mom can't accept that Sarah completes me in every way that matters, then we'll limit contact. My girls deserve better. Sarah's hands shook as she read the final entry, dated just 3 days before David's heart attack, June 15th. Sarah found out about her father's death through a newspaper obituary. She's devastated that they never got to reconcile. I can't tell her about the letters without destroying what's left of her relationship with Mom, but I also can't let this continue. I've decided we're moving across town, getting our own traditions, our own life. No more trying to fit into Mom's idea of what we should be. Sarah is complete exactly as she is, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure she knows it. Sarah pressed the journal to her chest, tears streaming down her face. David had known. He had seen through his mother's manipulation and had been planning to protect them. Her father had tried to reach out, had wanted to make amends before his death, but Margaret had stolen that chance from her. The custody petition wasn't about Emma's welfare, it was about control. Margaret wanted to eliminate Sarah from the Walsh legacy entirely, to mold Emma into her vision of perfection, while erasing any trace of Sarah's influence. But now Sarah had something Margaret didn't know existed: the truth, in David's own words, about who the real manipulator was in this family. Sarah barely slept that night. By dawn, she had read David's journal 3 times and formed a plan that would have made her late husband proud. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, truth, and fulfilling David's final promise to protect his family. Her first stop was First National Bank. With trembling hands, she retrieved the key from under Emma's jewelry box and opened safety deposit box 807. Inside, she found $1,407,000 in cash and bonds, along with a note in David's handwriting. For my girls' independence, use this to build the life we dreamed of, free from anyone else's expectations. Love always, D. Sarah's throat tightened. Even in death, David was still protecting them. That afternoon, she walked into the offices of Morrison & Associates, one of the city's most respected family law firms. Janet Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, listened intently as Sarah explained her situation. I've seen cases like this before, Janet said after reviewing the custody petition. Grandparents using their resources to intimidate grieving parents. But you're not without weapons, Sarah. Tell me about your relationship with Emma, your work stability, your support system. Sarah spent 2 hours documenting everything: Emma's excellent grades, her involvement in school activities, the steady stream of freelance clients, her savings account, their health insurance, their community connections. What had seemed like a modest life suddenly revealed itself as remarkably stable and nurturing. Now, Janet said, sliding David's journal across the desk, this changes everything. Your mother-in-law's pattern of manipulation and control, documented by her own son, gives us grounds to argue that supervised visitation would be in Emma's best interest, not expanded custody. Sarah's next move surprised even herself. She reached out to David's college roommate, Michael Torres, whom she'd lost touch with after the funeral. When they met for coffee, Michael's reaction to her story was immediate and fierce. I always wondered why David distanced himself from his family toward the end, Michael said. Now it makes sense. Margaret was always controlling, but intercepting your mail? That's psychotic behavior, Sarah. Michael connected her with 3 other college friends who had witnessed Margaret's manipulation over the year. One by one, they shared stories. Margaret badmouthing Sarah at David's graduation party, her inappropriate comments about Sarah's ethnicity, her attempts to exclude Sarah from family planning discussion. David used to vent to us about his mom's treatment of you, revealed Lisa Chen, David's study partner. He said she made you feel like you weren't good enough, but he thought you were perfect exactly as you were. He'd be furious if he knew what she was trying to do now. Sarah also discovered that Margaret had alienated other family members with similar tactics. David's cousin Patricia had been cut off from family gatherings after marrying someone Margaret deemed unsuitable. Uncle Frank's daughter had been criticized for her career choices until she stopped attending family events altogether. Margaret has a pattern, Patricia told Sarah over the phone. She uses money and guilt to control people, and when that doesn't work, she tries to eliminate them from the family entirely. I'm willing to testify about what I've witnessed. The most delicate part of Sarah's plan involved Emma herself. Sarah couldn't shield her daughter from the custody battle entirely, but she could prepare her with age-appropriate honesty. Grandma Margaret thinks you might be happier living with her sometimes, Sarah explained one evening as they worked on a puzzle together. She has a big house and can offer you things I can't, like private school and expensive activities. Emma looked up, confusion clouding her features. But I like our home, I like my school. My friends are here, I know, sweetheart. And I want you to know that whatever happens, you can always tell me how you feel. Daddy wrote in his journal that the most important thing is for you to be yourself, to be happy, and to be loved for exactly who you are. Sarah showed Emma some of the gentler passages from David's journal, the ones about how proud he was of both of them, how he thought their little family was perfect as it was. Daddy thought we were complete? Emma asked, tracing her finger over David's handwriting. More than complete, Sarah said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. He thought we were extraordinary. The strategy takes shape. By the end of the month, Sarah had assembled a formidable case. She had documentation of her stable income and savings, character witnesses who could speak to her parenting, and David's journal, revealing Margaret's manipulative behavior. She had allies within the Walsh family willing to testify about Margaret's pattern of control and exclusion. Most importantly, she had something Margaret had tried to destroy, proof that David had chosen his wife and daughter over his mother's approval, and that his final wishes were for them to live free from his family's toxic influence. Sarah sat in her small apartment, surrounded by legal documents and witness statements, feeling something she hadn't experienced in 2 years: confidence. Margaret had underestimated the woman she'd dismissed as incomplete. She was about to learn that a mother fighting for her child was the most complete force in the universe. The battle lines were drawn and Sarah was ready for war. Margaret Walsh had not become the matriarch of a prominent family by backing down from fight. When her private investigator informed her that Sarah had hired Janet Morrison, one of the city's most formidable family lawyers, Margaret's response was swift and vicious. The first salvo came through Emma's school. Sarah received a call from the principal, Miss Henderson, requesting an urgent meeting. "I'm sorry to bring this up, Sarah," Mrs. Henderson said uncomfortably, "but we've received some concerning information about Emma's home situation. Miss Walsh contacted us expressing worry about Emma's emotional state and suggesting that the school might want to document any signs of distress or instability." Sarah's jaw tightened. "What exactly did she tell you?" "She mentioned financial difficulties, inconsistent schedules due to your freelance work, and concerns about Emma's emotional well-being following her father's death. She suggested we keep detailed records of Emma's behavior and any signs that she might be struggling at home." Sarah felt the familiar burn of humiliation, but this time it was tempered by anger. "Mrs. Henderson, Emma is one of your best students. She's involved in art club, has strong friendships, and has shown remarkable resilience. Has she displayed any concerning behavior? The principal shifted uncomfortably. No, actually, Emma is thriving. She's creative, confident, and well-adjusted. But Mrs. Walsh was quite persuasive. She mentioned that the family has resources to help Emma if needed. I see. Sarah's voice was steady, but inside she was seething. Margaret was trying to plant seeds of doubt about her parenting in every institution that mattered. The attacks escalated throughout the week. Sarah's biggest client, a local restaurant chain, suddenly canceled their contract after receiving an anonymous tip about her unstable personal situation. Her landlord received a complaint about excessive noise from their apartment. Even Emma's soccer coach mentioned that someone had called asking pointed questions about Sarah's attendance at games and whether Emma seemed properly supervised. Margaret's masterpiece came during Emma's weekend visit to the Walsh compound. When Emma returned home Sunday evening, she was unusually quiet. "How was your visit with Grandma?" Sarah asked gently. Emma fidgeted with her backpack straps. "She showed me the room that would be mine if I lived there. It's really big, Mommy, and she said I could have a horse if I wanted." Sarah's heart clenched, but she kept her voice calm. "That sounds nice. What else did you do?" "We went shopping, and she bought me this." Emma pulled out an expensive tablet. "She said I could keep it if I told her about how things are at home. Like if you seem sad or worried, or if we don't have enough money for things." The manipulation was breathtaking in its calculated cruelty. Margaret was using an 8-year-old as a spy against her own mother. Grandma also said. Emma hesitated, then whispered. "She said Daddy would want me to have the best life possible, and that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt children." Sarah knelt down to Emma's level, taking her daughter's hands gently. "Emma, do you think I've made mistakes that hurt you?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "No, Mommy, but Grandma says you're struggling and that Daddy would be sad if he knew how hard things are for us. She says the big house has everything Daddy wanted me to have." That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah called her sister Jenny in California, breaking down completely for the first time since the custody battle began. "She's turning my own daughter against me," Sarah sobbed. "Emma is starting to question whether I'm enough for her. What if Margaret's right? What if I can't give Emma the life she deserves?" "Sarah, stop," Jenny said firmly. "You're letting that woman get in your head. Emma loves you. She's happy. Margaret is using money and manipulation to make you doubt yourself. Don't let her win." But the doubt had taken root. When Emma asked the next morning if they could afford to go to Disney World like Grandma had suggested, Sarah saw the comparison forming in her daughter's mind. When Emma mentioned that some kids at school had horses and wondered why they couldn't, Sarah felt her confidence cracking. The breaking point came when Margaret played her final card. She arranged for Catherine and Robert to visit Emma at school, officially to check on their niece, but really to reinforce their narrative. They took Emma to lunch and spoke glowingly about the opportunities waiting for her in the Walsh family, private school, summer camps, college connections, travel opportunities. "Your mom loves you," Catherine told Emma carefully, "but love isn't always enough. Sometimes families need to make hard decisions about what's best for children." That evening, Emma sat at their small kitchen table, pushing food around her plate. Finally, she looked up with tears in her eyes and asked the question that nearly broke Sarah's heart. "Mommy, would I really be happier living with Grandma? Margaret, she has so much more to offer me than we do here." Sarah stared at her daughter, her brilliant, creative, loving daughter, and realized that Margaret's campaign was working. Emma was beginning to believe that their life together wasn't enough, that Sarah's love couldn't compete with the Walsh family's wealth and status. For the first time since the custody battle began, Sarah felt truly afraid, not just of losing the legal fight, but of losing Emma's faith in their life together. Margaret wasn't just trying to take custody, she was systematically destroying Emma's confidence in her mother's ability to provide for her. The hearing was only 2 weeks away, and Sarah could feel everything slipping through her fingers. The family courtroom was smaller than Sarah had expected, but the tension filling it was enormous. Margaret sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by her expensive legal team, her silver hair perfectly styled, her navy suit conveying authority and respectability. Behind her sat Catherine and Robert, presenting a united front of Walsh family solidarity. Sarah sat with Janet Morrison, David's journal, and the evidence they'd gathered spread across their table. Her hands trembled slightly as she watched Emma enter the courtroom with the court-appointed guardian ad litem, looking impossibly small in her best dress. Judge Patricia Reeves called the session to order, her stern expression revealing nothing about her thoughts. "We're here to consider the petition of Margaret Walsh for partial custody of her granddaughter, Emma Walsh Chen, Mrs. Walsh, please present your case. Margaret's attorney painted a devastating picture of Sarah's inadequacy. He spoke of financial instability, inappropriate living conditions, and a grieving mother unable to provide the structure and opportunities this child deserved. Catherine testified about Sarah's artistic lifestyle and unconventional choices, while Robert presented charts showing the Walsh family's financial advantages. Emma deserves stability, Margaret said when called to testify, her voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. She deserves the best education, cultural opportunities, and preparation for success that only our family can provide. Sarah means well, but meaning well isn't enough when a child's future is at stake. Sarah watched Emma's face during the testimony, seeing confusion and conflict in her daughter's eyes. Every word seemed designed to make Emma question whether her life with Sarah was truly enough. Then it was Janet Morrison's turn. Your Honor, this case isn't about what's best for Emma, it's about control. Mrs. Walsh has spent years undermining Sarah Chen's confidence, and now seeks to complete that destruction by taking her daughter away. Janet methodically dismantled Margaret's argument. She presented Sarah's financial records showing steady income and savings, testimonials from Emma's teachers about her happiness and academic success, and character references from their community. Sarah Chen has raised a confident, creative, academically successful child who is thriving in every measurable way. The only instability in Emma's life comes from her grandmother's attempts to undermine her mother's authority. Then came the moment Sarah had been dreading and anticipating. Janet approached the bench with David's journal. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that reveals the true nature of this custody dispute. Evidence written by Margaret Walsh's own son, David Walsh, Emma's father. Margaret's composure cracked for the first time. Objection. That journal is private family. Overruled, Judge Reeves said sharply. I'll allow it. Janet read selected passages aloud. David's plans to protect his family from his mother's toxicity, his discovery of the intercepted letters from Sarah's father, his recognition that Sarah was complete exactly as she is. The courtroom was silent as the judge reviewed the journal. Margaret's face had gone pale, her mask of benevolent concern finally slipping to reveal something much uglier. Mrs. Walsh, Judge Reeves said, did you intercept and destroy correspondence between Mrs. Chen and her dying father? Margaret's attorney whispered urgently in her ear, but she pushed him away. I was protecting this family from. Answer the question, Mrs. Walsh. Did you prevent a daughter from reconciling with her dying father? The silence stretched like a taut wire. Finally, Margaret lifted her chin defiantly. I did what I thought was best for everyone involved. Sarah's father was. That wasn't your decision to make, the judge interrupted, her voice ice cold. But the real turning point came when Emma was called to speak with the judge privately. Through the glass partition, Sarah could see her daughter's animated gestures, could see the moment when Emma's face became determined and sure. When they returned to the courtroom, Judge Reeves addressed everyone present. Emma has something she'd like to say. Emma walked to the witness stand, her small hands gripping the rail. She looked directly at Margaret, then at Sarah, before speaking in a clear, strong voice that reminded Sarah achingly of David. I love Grandma Margaret, but I want to stay with my mommy. Mommy doesn't have a big house or lots of money, but she has something better. She lets me be myself. When I draw weird pictures, she puts them on the refrigerator. When I ask million questions, she answers every one. When I'm sad about Daddy, she cries with me, and then we make cookies. Emma's voice grew stronger. Daddy wrote in his journal that being yourself is the most important thing, and Mommy helps me be myself every day. Grandma Margaret wants me to be someone different, someone perfect. But I don't want to be perfect. I want to be me. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Margaret's face had crumpled, all her composure gone. Catherine was crying quietly. Even Robert looked shaken. Emma continued, I know Grandma has more money and a bigger house, but home isn't about big houses. Home is where someone loves you exactly as you are. My home is with Mommy. Judge Reeves nodded slowly. Thank you, Emma. You may return to your seat. The judge took only 15 minutes to deliberate. When she returned, her expression was grave. I have rarely seen a case where the petitioner's motivations were so clearly revealed to be about control rather than the child's welfare. Emma Walsh Chen is a thriving, happy, well-adjusted child who has been raised with love, creativity, and strong values by her mother. Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief. Furthermore, Judge Reeves continued, Mrs. Walsh's pattern of manipulation and interference, including the unconscionable act of preventing Mrs. Chen from reconciling with her dying father, demonstrates a troubling disregard for boundaries and the well-being of this family. The judge's gaze fell sternly on Margaret. Not only am I denying your petition for custody, Miss Walsh, but I am restricting your visitation with Emma to supervised visits only, pending a psychological evaluation. Your behavior has been manipulative and harmful to this child's emotional well-being. Margaret stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. I can provide opportunities that she'll never enough, Judge Reeves said firmly. This hearing is concluded. As the courtroom emptied, Sarah knelt down and pulled Emma into her arms. They clung to each other, both crying now while Margaret walked past them without a word, her legal team trailing behind her like pallbearers. We did it, baby, Sarah whispered into Emma's hair. We're going home. Emma pulled back to look at her mother's face. We were always home, Mom. We just had to help everyone else see it. 6 months later, Sarah knelt in the rich black soil of their new backyard, her hands dirty and her heart light. They had moved to a charming duplex across town, not to escape but to embrace the fresh start that David's savings had made possible. The small garden plot behind their home was Emma's idea, inspired by a school project about growth and renewal. Mom, should the tomatoes go here or there? Emma called out, holding a seedling with the same careful attention she gave to her artwork. Wherever you think they'll be happiest, Sarah replied, watching her daughter's face scrunch in concentration. The custody battle had changed Emma in subtle but important ways. She was more confident in her opinions, more aware of her own worth, and somehow both more mature and more freely childlike than before. The supervised visits with Margaret had lasted only 2 months. The court-appointed supervisor's reports painted a picture of a grandmother who struggled to connect with Emma without trying to control or change her. Margaret's attempts to discuss private school and proper activities during their limited time together only served to highlight how little she understood or accepted her granddaughter's true nature. Eventually, Margaret had stopped requesting visits altogether. Catherine later told Sarah that her mother-in-law had moved to Florida to live near Robert's family, claiming she needed a change of scenery. Sarah suspected Margaret simply couldn't bear to stay in a place where her authority had been so thoroughly challenged and found wanting. The aftermath within the Walsh family had been revealing. Catherine had reached out first, arriving at Sarah's door with tears in her eyes and a heartfelt apology. I was so wrong, Catherine had said, sitting in Sarah's modest living room while Emma played nearby. Mom had us convinced that you were somehow inadequate, but watching you fight for Emma, seeing the strength and grace you showed even when we were all against you, I realized we were the ones who were inadequate. We chose comfort and family loyalty over what was right. Catherine's relationship with her mother had grown strained after the trial. She'd begun questioning other family dynamics, other times when Margaret had manipulated situations to maintain control. She did something similar when I was dating Michael in college, Catherine admitted. Convinced Dad to threaten to cut off my tuition unless I broke up with him. I always thought it was about his background, but now I wonder if it was just about control. Robert had been slower to come around, but he'd eventually sent a formal letter of apology and a college savings account for Emma. I want to be the uncle David would want me to be, he'd written. That means supporting you and Emma, not undermining you. Sarah's own life had flourished in unexpected ways. The publicity from the custody case, several local news outlets had covered the story of the grandmother who tried to steal custody through manipulation, had actually brought her new client. People admired her quiet strength and wanted to support her business. She'd been featured in a local magazine as an example of resilience and single-parent success. More importantly, she'd discovered a confidence she never knew she possessed. The woman who had once desperately sought Margaret's approval, now understood that the only approval that mattered came from herself and from Emma. Mommy, look, Emma called out, holding up a small gardening trowel. I found some. Sarah hurried over to see Emma carefully brushing dirt from a small metal box buried in the garden plot. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a note from the previous tenant. Welcome to your new home. May it bring you as much joy as it brought our family. The Johnsons. Emma grinned up at her mother. It's like a treasure, a welcome present from people we've never even met. As they cleaned up their gardening supplies that evening, Emma grew thoughtful. Mommy, do you think Daddy knows we won? Sarah considered the question seriously. I think Daddy always knew we'd be okay, but yes, I think he'd be proud that we stood up for ourselves and stayed true to who we are. That night after Emma was asleep, Sarah sat at her desk and opened the drawer where she kept David's journal. She'd started writing in it occasionally, continuing his thoughts and updating him on their lives. Tonight she wrote, David, Emma planted tomatoes today. She's growing into exactly the person you hoped she'd become: strong, creative, kind, and completely herself. Margaret tried to change her, to mold her into some version of Walsh family perfection, but Emma chose authenticity over approval, just like her father did when he chose me. I finally understand what you meant when you said I was complete. It was never about having everything or being everything to everyone. It was about being enough, enough for you, enough for Emma, enough for myself. Margaret called me incomplete because I couldn't give you a son, because I didn't fit her idea of success. But we created something she never understood, a family built on love instead of expectation, acceptance instead of control. Your last promise was to protect us, and in a way, you kept it. The journal, the savings, the truth you wrote down, it all became our shield when we needed it most. But the real protection was the confidence you gave me, the belief that I was worthy exactly as I am. Emma and I are complete, David. We always were, we just had to help everyone else see it. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Janet Morrison stood on their doorstep with a smile and a manila envelope. I have something for you, she said, stepping into their sunny kitchen. Margaret Walsh's attorney contacted me yesterday. She's dropped all appeals and formally relinquished any future claims to custody or unsupervised visitation. Sarah sat down heavily. Is it really over? Completely over. You're free to move wherever you want. Make whatever decisions you think are best for Emma, without looking over your shoulder. Janet paused, then added with a smile, though I have to say you both seem to be thriving exactly where you are. As Janet left, Emma bounded into the kitchen, already dressed for school and clutching a drawing she'd made the night before. What's that, sweetheart? It's our family tree, Emma said proudly, showing a colorful drawing with herself and Sarah at the center. David's presence represented by a star overhead, and branches extending to Uncle Robert, Aunt Catherine, and several new friends they'd made in their neighborhood. Ms. Rodriguez said family trees show where you come from, but I think they also show where you're growing to. Sarah studied the drawing, noting that Margaret's name appeared nowhere on the branches. Emma hadn't deliberately excluded her. She simply hadn't thought to include someone who had never made her feel rooted or supported. I love it, Sarah said, kissing the top of Emma's head. Should we put it on the refrigerator with your other masterpiece? Actually, Emma said thoughtfully, I want to frame it and put it in our living room, so everyone who visits can see that our family might be small but it's mighty. That afternoon, as Sarah watched Emma play in their garden, dirt under her nails, grass stains on her clothes, completely and utterly herself, she felt a profound sense of completion. Not because she'd won some battle against Margaret, but because she'd finally understood what David had always known, that she had been whole all along. The woman Margaret had called incomplete had proven to be abundantly complete as a mother, as a professional, as a person worthy of love and respect. The real incompleteness had belonged to Margaret, who had confused control with care, money with love, and perfection with worth. In their small garden surrounded by the new life they were cultivating together, Sarah and Emma had found something Margaret's mansion could never contain: the unshakable certainty that they were enough, just as they were, exactly as they had always been.